So I'm gonna ask a question that might fly off the wrong way, but I'm gonna
Yes,
ask it anyways. Do you think that like to some degree there's also a certain level of internalized racism too? Because I've
absolutely.
noticed that the further up you
Absolutely.
go, the
Mhm.
less and less minority people you see. But it's not necessarily always because there's some kind of racial disparity. But from what I've realized, a lot of minorities, I don't know, maybe it's just like a lack of confidence to put
Yes,
ourselves out there,
absolutely.
or something that we just haven't been taught or we haven't seen
Absolutely.
modeled. But
Absolutely.
I've noticed that sometimes all you need to do is just say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm gonna be heard." But we don't do
Absolutely.
that. And
No.
then
No.
we then make excuses for it after. So is that something that we need
Absolutely.
to be working on too? Because we can't just be
Absolutely.
blaming the other person.
Absolutely. 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 Internalized racism is an absolute thing. And lack of confidence for a person of color is so there. Like the fact that I was talking to these soccer players, I mean, it wasn't even a challenging question. It's like it was a no-brainer. Like, why are you brings you to Peterborough? You know? And
Yeah.
they were like they couldn't even answer it. And I'm a black person. So I'm thinking, we just have a conversation, right?
Hmm.
So it is a lack of confidence. It is that they don't want to, like sit back, like take that the chance of their voices, and their voices are not heard because it's drowned out because of the fact that the dominant white society is drowning it out, right? And that's where the
Hmm.
frustration comes in when you get those riots, um, the peaceful protests that have turned to riots. Uh, um, so no one is immune. Yes, no one is immune. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Um, because of the frustrations, because you're not being heard, you're trying to let your voice be heard, and no one
Hmm.
is, So, for example, um, like the invisible factor of racism,
Hmm.
meaning that when I go in somewhere and it's an all white place, I'm very used to being in an all white setting. I grew up
Hmm.
in the Junction, Dundas and Kiel, and in my neighborhood we were the only black family. We played. I played. We played very easily with the people in the neighborhood. I went to a school that had mostly all whites. It was all whites. So from a very young age, I'm used to white. It's like I'm very comfortable with white people.
Yeah.
Loved hockey, still love hockey. Grew up every Saturday night was hockey night in Canada. You wouldn't see anybody on the streets on Saturday night where we grew up. We were all into hockey, all into Toronto Maple Leafs. We used to collect baseball cards, traded with the
Wow.
kids, everything. So, we'd go skating. So we did the whole 9 yards,
Hmm.
as far as being, so I'm very comfortable in a way with whites. But I find in Peterborough, that's not the situation. They are not comfortable with me. And I could see they're uncomfortable when
Hmm.
I walk into a room. They don't know sometimes kind of how to approach you, kind of like what
Hmm.
to say, because God forbid if they say something that's politically incorrect, right? And oh God,
Hmm.
because they know I'm with race relations, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my gosh, here goes Charmaine. Like, what if I said something that's not correct and it calls me a racist? So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if they know me, but even if they don't know me, you do get that invisible factor. So, um, and so the thing with internalized racism, you start to feel like you don't belong. And so that's
Hmm.
where you start to get the non-confidence. Because when I
Hmm.
walk into a room, even though I have made a voice here in Peterborough in this society, I do get times where I feel not don't have the confidence to speak up because of how I'm being treated by the dominant society.
Hmm.
And it's very simple. It's like, you go into a room and you're in a circle and everyone is like talking to each other. Oh, how you doing? And they'll greet you. Hey, hi. And but that's about it. But to other people, it's like, oh, how was your weekend? Blah, blah, blah. But you're just
Mm-hmm.
sitting there, you're like, oh, okay. Like, you know, and so you keep quiet. You don't want to talk because you think that your voice is not going to be heard and they don't really care about you. And that's the thing. They don't really care about you. So, um,
Mm.
yeah.
I find what Danielle commented and said, I think a lot of times minorities are just afraid to take up space. I think that's also like in alignment with what you're saying. I think that's kind of true as well.
Hmm.
Not kind of true, that's true too. Because again, for me, I think we've obviously had these discussions before. I grew up with a lot of Black people, but I also grew up with a lot of a diverse group of people. And so for me, I don't necessarily, I've been taught that if you want something, they will hear you. And that's something that I've realized, like a lot of the Black people I talk to personally are afraid to air out their opinions. They are afraid of what the repercussions will be if they disagree with another person. And we were even talking about it with Trent a couple of, like about a month ago, about how a lot of like international students will come into an environment where
Hmm.
they've always been taught that the white people are the dominant people. And then now you're essentially forced to sit in class with the people who are supposed to be your oppressors and have conversations with them and do group assignments with them, but that's not how your mind works. And then go to job interviews and be successful at integrating with your society. But again, they don't put into account the idea that a lot of these people, a lot of us have grown up being taught that white people, other races, and I think now China as well, a lot of other races that aren't Black are the dominant races. And so it becomes difficult for people to feel safe to even air out their opinions or feel safe to be themselves in these
Yeah.
spaces because all their lives they've been taught to be silent.
Yeah, yeah. And I like the comment here. We all receive the same socialization. No one is immune.
Welcome to everybody who is joining. See some familiar faces. We're going to be talking about racism and racial injustices. This is going to be part 2 of the video. Guys, this part 2 it's important that we all ask questions. If you have any questions for Charmaine. Yeah, as we wait for Charmaine. Thank you for this interview. I hope Charmaine makes it back. I hope so too. I really hope so too. We're trying to get her back, but it keeps saying that it's waiting for Charmaine to load. There we
There we
go.
go. There we go. Now you can see my I have it so you can see my t-shirt, Black Lives Matter.
Yay! I think I need to get one too. Where
Oh
do I find
yes.
one?
Oh, I don't know. I'm doing good. Someone's asking how are you doing. This is much better. Now I figured this out. And
Yay!
second half. All I need, actually, it's so funny because we don't have air conditioning in this house. So I was saying, yeah, I was saying what we need to do is just get some sand in here and have it like a little beach. We're in Jamaica, put on our bathing suits, and like this is Jamaica,
That's a
like
good
because
idea.
we're
That's a good
sweating,
idea.
and what's even better is that we're sweating inside and we're not getting a tan, so we're not getting dark tan.
Mm, mm,
We're keeping our shade.
You don't want the colorism police to find you and hunt you.
Yeah, because I was like, yeah, but no sun, right? So I really don't care. But you know, it's interesting because you see, this is a thing about shadism. So I'm not even joking. I went to a restaurant, Chinese restaurant in Toronto. It was definitely like the menu was in Chinese and
Mhm.
95% of them were from China. And on the menu, I couldn't believe it. They said one of the dishes, they claim, oh, if you eat this dish, you become whiter. I was like, oh my
What?
yes, it did. It said it. I couldn't believe. I was gonna say, and I was with like a few black people, and we were like dying laughing. Like, how could a dish make you whiter? But they were claiming that this dish, if you eat it, will make you whiter. In this diet, and I'm like, oh my god!
I mean,
It
I'm
works.
curious now. I just want to know if it works.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. Like, we were gonna order a whole bunch of, we were gonna order a whole bunch of this one dish, right? To see if we like while we're eating, we
If
become
it
whiter.
works, that would be, and I would want to know the science behind it, to be honest. Like,
Yeah,
what ingredient do they use to make it work?
yeah, but
That's crazy.
it actually said on the menu. Yeah, eat this dish and you become whiter. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god. Oh,
Okay, so guys, we're talking about colorism, and yeah, I don't remember where we were before we left
no,
the
we were asking about the confidence that the people don't blacks do not have.
Yes. Oh, I know where I wanted to go. So I have a question for you, Charmaine.
Okay, I'm single. You're gonna ask me for dates. I'm available. You can put a
Okay,
ring on
before
finger.
do either of you feel unsafe in this community? Charmaine, do you want to answer that first?
Uh, that's why I travel only with big white men, and when I go out, so
Mm.
they're my protectors.
Honestly, I don't think I felt unsafe initially. When I first moved here, I think when I lived in the UK, I went to a school where you could count on on your fingers the number of black people that were in my like the high school section of my school. So I got used to being the only one black person. And so when I moved to Peterborough, it wasn't a different community. It was pretty much the same. I think for the first maybe 2 or 3 years, I didn't really feel particularly unsafe. But I think
Mhm.
recently I've become very, very much aware of everything that goes on in this community sometimes. It's not everybody, but it's some people. And I think I feel unsafe, not necessarily just because of my race, but I'm 4'11" and I'm a
Yeah,
woman.
yes, that's right.
And
That
recently,
counts too.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So like all those little intersections, I'm just like sometimes I feel the need to just, walk a little bit faster to get to where I need to get to. I always have my friends on speed dial. My friends have my location at all times. I'm not playing those games. And if I find somebody who's following me, I was taught that if you turn around and make eye contact, people feel shame. So I turn around and I look them in the eye, and they usually turn around and then I run. So yeah.
So, you know, that's a really good question. The first time I heard about blacks being fearful of white people was when I read Maya Angelou's book, Know Why the Caged Birds Sing. Can't remember it.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
in the book, she talks about being, because she grew up in an all-black community, and there was a lot of talk in her community about being fearful of whites. And then she went somewhere, and she was fearful when she was in an all-white community because of what they could do to her. And at the time, because I grew up in an all-white community, and I was never fearful, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, like black people could be fearful of. I don't know. I guess I was very ignorant, obviously, because I read the book when I was like, I think first year university or something, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that this was a thing that blacks could be fearful of whites, because at that time I grew up in an all-white neighborhood, and there was never any overtly whites being up a Black person. So it was like, oh, you could be
Mm-hmm.
fearful. So because of that, yeah, no, I do not feel fearful. It's because of my upbringing. Now, having said that, I am fearful for my son. Okay, I'm fearful for my son. I'm fearful for, when he goes out in the community with because he has a very good group of white friends, and they go out on town. I am fearful when he goes out with his friends because he's the only Black guy with them, and they don't know. They just see him as a regular Black guy, and he's a pretty muscular guy. If you see my son, he's pretty muscular,
Mm-hmm.
but he is so gentle. I remember putting him in karate when he was 8 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
he only lasted one session because he said he didn't want to hit people. So he he did not couldn't he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do the karate thing. He didn't like the
Yeah.
fighting and stuff. And so people seeing him will unfortunately be maybe like a George, like being like you know listening to the police officer, because that's what he was
Mm-hmm.
doing. He
Mm-hmm.
was, they didn't, there was no resistance when they handcuffed him in. There was no resistance when they put him on the ground, no resistance when they took him out of the car. He was compliant, right? He died because he was Black. He was a Black man, and that was his crime. And so I am fearful for my son, and
Yeah.
he has had incidents that unfortunately he was attacked,
Mm-hmm.
being in an all-white community, and he was attacked. It wasn't necessarily in Peterborough, but it was like an all-white community, and so I'm
Mm.
fearful for him. Yeah, I'm fearful for him.
We had someone say that they had been called the N-word whilst they were taking a walk. And I just wanted to like acknowledge that and say like, yo, we're so sorry that has happened to you. And I just wanted to give like a plug that if there are any people who have experienced any kind of um, racial situations with racism or injustice, you can definitely come to the CRRC, the Community Race Relations Committee. We are here to serve everybody, and even if it's just getting you connected with people who can resources. That's our job, and we want to be able to support you in whatever way that we can. Follow us on Instagram. I'm giving you a shameless plug because I think we do a really kick-ass job. And I have a bias because obviously I work with CRC, but yeah, if you ever have any situations, please feel free to reach out to us. We do have training sessions as well. And I think that's one of the things that's made me feel safe in Peterborough as well. We had a decolonization event where like all the young people essentially had conversations with all the older people. And we had Peterborough police come. We had we had a bunch of people from the community come. And I spoke
Okay.
specifically to the head of police, the Peterborough police
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
Yes. And I explained to him my point of view and why I felt unsafe in Peterborough. And he explained to me like the way the police view the situation as well. And I think it made me have a better understanding of what my rights are. Because I'm an international student, and a lot of the times we aren't even aware of what our rights are. And so I would encourage you to come to some of these events. They really open up your mind and hopefully will make you feel safer being a part of this community, because you don't want to be in a community where
Exactly.
you don't feel safe. That's not the way you want to live your life. Someone asked, thank you for doing this. I heard responding to racial posts as a white person is helpful. Do you feel this is helpful? Charmaine, what do you think?
Can you say that again? You were cutting out.
Oh, I heard responding to racial posts as a white person on social media is helpful. Do you feel that this is helping?
Oh, you mean as a about someone responds is like it's a racial post and a white person responds to it?
Yeah. Or like
Um,
even like I know for me, I've had a situation where someone said a racial slur, and before I even said anything about it, the other white person that I was with essentially just interjected, cut that person down real quick. And they ended up just like simmering their energy down and apologizing. And so maybe like a situation like that as well. What do you think about that? Is that helpful?
yeah, especially if they're, if they're really educated,
Hmm.
and they, they know the language. But it's almost like, the movie Get Out, right? Have you seen
Mm,
that one?
mm, hmm, hmm.
Where the white girlfriend is, when they're stopped by the white officer, and she knew the language, but she was very,
Hmm.
like, she knew what to say, like, how come you're asking him for his driver's license, like,
Hmm.
what is, like, what's up with that? So like I said, people could, definitely, be say the right words, which is very helpful, to advocate. But sometimes you have to also let the Black person advocate and let them have that voice, right, to step up and play.
Mm,
But I totally like, on social media. I do find it refreshing when a white person says the right thing as far as trying to put down any sort of racist comment, because
mm,
sometimes, as a Black person, when it's especially on social media, you have the target on your back, and
mm,
people, unfortunately, on social media can be more aggressive with their racist views. CBC had to, when it comes to indigenous, anything indigenous, they had to dismantle the comment section because a lot of the people writing in, were very racist against, so they had to take that down, um,
wow.
sort of thing. So, yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing that. Someone else asked, how do you feel, uh, oh, sorry. How do you folks feel about allyship in the city, especially the trending allyship that seems to be prevalent? Prevalent?
Yeah, prevalent, prevalent.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like switching between like my Zimbabwean side and my other side.
So, Alicia, so with the Black Lives Matter, it's funny because, when we had our Black Lives Matter meetings or groups or whatever, it was like maybe just me and Niambi that were the only Black people, and everybody else. And they
Mm,
were, having said that, they were the ones who were with us. They were very supportive and very giving us the floor to voice what we had to say and to organize accordingly. So they were very good in that way. They,
mm,
they would mute themselves, and I find, that people in Peterborough, the ones who want to form that ally, would mute themselves and give, the floor to those people of color. So that's really good. And understanding that. So, for example, at our rallies, we would have, the Blacks who were in the community, they were the ones who went and they spoke, and they understood that. So some people do have problems with that because they are allies, and they're thinking, why can't we also speak because we're supporting you? But the
mm,
true allies would say, no, you've been silent for too long. This is the opportunity for Blacks. So, for example, when we first started, like, 2013, with building allyship. I don't know how you say it.
allyship?
Um, allyship,
Yeah.
and the TV would come, like, news crew would come, and it would be automatic. They would go right to the, like, it'd be like we're organizing something, and it's like other rally, to empower Blacks, and there'd be like maybe not a lot of Blacks, but they
Mm,
would go right to like, what do you think, right? And
mm,
so those people would redirect them and say, go talk to Niambi or Charmaine. Like, we're always in the spotlight. And that's the thing
yeah.
with building allyship, is it's giving opportunity to uh, to build the confidence of a person of color, because especially as
Yes.
a Black woman, we don't get the opportunity. And so having said that, I did get a lot of flack when I called out the white guy who got the executive director position of you know where in Peterborough. And, because people were saying, oh, some people, of course, some people unfortunately call me racist, and you're so racist, like, how dare you, call out a white guy, he's probably well qualified for the job and blah, 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 right? But that's not the point. Yes, it was discriminatory to say he shouldn't have, that's discriminating against him, right? But it was to make the right wrong, to bring racial equality in the society, in an organization that's run mainly by women. 80% of women in that organization, and 8% are women, and 50 or more percent are a person of color. And then you put a white guy in there without any immigration. A fourth generation Canadian does not make any freaking sense. And people could not understand that. Even some of the allies who would be very nice to me. Oh, Charmaine, I read the article and I understand a lot. But, and I heard that behind my back, they were like, oh, I can't believe she said that. Like, that is just so wrong. Like, no. Like, that was an opportunity to promote a person of color, promote a woman to take that leadership role, right? They couldn't find somebody, they could have dug a little deeper, honestly, So yes, it was discriminatory because it was saying that, basically that somebody who was of color should have gotten the job, right?
Yeah.
And and we need to give more opportunities to Blacks. If you look, or a person of color, if you look at the numbers, look at the statistics. They're not in corporate Canada. They're not getting the good jobs. They're not. It's a lack of opportunity, and people hire who they know.
Yeah.
People hire who they know.
And I think it's really interesting. I was actually going to ask you about that. Someone asked, how do you feel about employment opportunities? Do you find that there's a lot of discrimination in the hiring process?
Right. So that's a really good question because, like I said, Black, so people of color, Indigenous people, they don't get the opportunity. The benefit of the doubt goes to person, the dominant culture, white culture, because they talk the same language, or they may go to the same university, or they're alumni, right? And so it's hard for a person of color to get a good position, not just in Peterborough, but in general. It's the comfort level. It's a comfort, right? Especially if they don't. So, for example, my daughter, her husband works at a company in Toronto, a computer company, and this is Toronto. And I think I could be wrong. She's on the feed right now, but I think there's like 100 people, and out of the 100, I think he said 10% is a people of color. So it's very few and far between, and that's in Toronto. That's in Toronto, right?
See, even as an international student, I've just, not to cut you off, sorry. I've noticed that a lot of the jobs that I get because I can pass as like another, there's like, I don't know if it's a microaggression, but a lot of people who hire me say, oh, but you're not like Black like the other people. Like your accent, when you answer the phone, it doesn't sound like other African people. So I think also in terms of just like availability of opportunities, it's almost like if you can pass off as being a little bit more Canadian,
European.
You're picked.
Or European.
Yeah.
Yeah.
European. There we go.
And thank you, Marie, for the shout out. There's not one person of color leader in Peterborough. Not one. That's right. There isn't. Not one. Out of 75,000, you couldn't name except maybe you could say our counselors. We have two, but there's no person of color in leadership. So that's what made it hard when I saw that post going to another white person, another white guy. I just thought, oh my God, it's so wrong in so many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Alex said, are you fearful of the police in Peterborough?
I've never
Ah,
really.
I used to be. So I'll tell you a fun story time.
Okay.
So, um, first year summer, I was driving in Toronto and I was
Uh-huh.
pulled over by the police.
Oh my gosh. You were driving a BMW though? You're laughing because I know that's true. That's so true. Black person was driving a rich car. That's what happened. It was a BMW. I know
I was
you.
pulled I was pulled over by the police, and I'm not
Uh-huh.
even gonna lie to you. I almost peed my pants just a little bit. I was so scared, and I'm so lucky I had my friend there with me because I feel like if I was on my own, I would have just gone like crazy and just like I literally I and after that I didn't drive for like a year because I
Oh
was
no.
genuinely traumatized. Oh, oh. So I'm not gonna lie, I used to be afraid of the police, but I think I'm at peace now. At least
Uh,
with the Peterborough police, because I know CRC has done a bit of training with them, and at
uh,
least I've met a couple of them, so I know what to expect. But yeah, there was a season in my life where I would see a cop car and I would be driving, and my heart would do like palpitations, and oh Jesus, I don't want to die today. I don't want to go to heaven today. Again, it's a fear, and a lot of it is very irrational. But based on a lot of the stats and some of the things we see,
yeah,
especially with social media, like, yeah.
absolutely. But yeah, I could say that again, my history is like I said, I'm very comfortable white and I'm not fearful. I am fearful when I'm driving because 99% of the time I'm speeding. So I'm like, oh my God. When she comes up and says like, I hope I'm not getting a ticket because I do speed. I do speed. So, but yeah. So my good night, Maria.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
for coming.
yeah. So I'm not as yeah. But yeah, but definitely there are lots of people who've had very bad experience with police
Yeah.
and because of their skin color, and they're treated inhumanely.
Mm,
So it can happen.
mm.
But personally, I've never had any. I did have one experience though. I had one
Ooh.
experience.
Spill the tea.
Well, you know what happened? This is what happened. So, there's not that many black people in Peterborough. This is almost a little bit embarrassing. There's not that many black people and so I was driving one day and
Mm-hmm.
I saw these black kids. Like they were walking to school actually. There was three black kids. And so I stopped the car and I greeted them. I said, "Hey, hi, how are you doing?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the time I had this like this publication
Mm-hmm.
that had my name and number, and it was like it had Joseph. It's called The Percolator, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And they said Nigeria. And I said, "Oh, that's great. My son-in-law is from Nigeria." They seemed really nice, so I gave them
Mm-hmm.
the flyer, and I said I circled because it had my name and number. I said, "Give this to your parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to touch bases with you later." I'm at work. Can't believe it. I got a call from the police officer. I was at work. Yeah, I got it from police. And I was so mad. I was so mad because supposedly what happened is I went to school and they said how I guess, a black woman in a car, stopped. I was talking to them and gave this flyer and the teacher overheard it and thought, "Oh my gosh, a predator is in our midst." They called the police on me. I was
Really?
so sad. Oh yes, they called the police on me. It was
Oh
like,
my word. That's
yeah.
crazy.
And I just basically, I told the police officer off. I said, like, come on, really, honestly.
Mm.
I was really upset.
Talking about police
I
though,
gave him an earful. I gave him an
really?
earful when he called me. Oh, absolutely. I gave him an earful. I gave him an earful. I said,
Raw.
Google my name. I told him that. I said, Google my name. And like, honestly, like, anyhow, yeah, that
Crazy,
was it.
crazy.
Was, yeah.
Someone asked, since you mentioned about the police, someone said, what kind of reform do you think we need when it comes to police brutality?
So that's Desmond Cole in his book.
Mm.
Shout out to the book. Can you see that? I know the skin.
So I'm actually gonna put like a book list from like a reading book list so that people can go and like check out the books as well. So I'll get that from you after the live and then I can post
Yeah,
it on
sure.
the various social media and
Yeah.
that way people can actually go read the books too.
Yeah, so in his book, he really talks about police brutality because um, uh, police in are overly when it comes to black, there's over brutality with police officers being more brutal to people who are people of color. And what he proposes that to do policing differently
Mm.
to when there is like mental health issue with a person, instead of sending the police with guns in, that could escalate the problem, to
Mm.
de-escalate it, to bring in people who are trained in mental health issues, so more of a
Mm.
community base. And also even in the book, Black Cops is another good example.
Mm.
I forget his name, but anyhow, he really promotes to get to know the neighborhood, spending time getting to know people so that you know the community you're in and they feel safe that they could come to the police and talk,
Mm.
building that rapport with community instead of just going in, doing the carding, and
Mm.
things like that, is building that relationship. And everything is really
Definitely.
important. And that's what it is to be someone's asked how to become allies, is
Yes.
building the relationship with people of color, coming to things like
Mm.
that, coming to CRC events. It's a difficult conversation to talk about racism because it's ingrained, right? Uh,
Mm.
it, it's what we've learned. As like you said, 3 years old, it's what we learned. So it's
Mm.
hard to even come to grips with the fact that you have these racist views, and even as a black person you have these racist views, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I grew up, fortunately my mom was not into colorism. She never said, oh, look at that person, she's so dark, right? They
Mm.
never. But having said that, in the Jamaican community, that's a thing. and
Mm.
and so we would unfortunately have friends who were Jamaicans who were like that. And I remember the one family, they had 3 kids, and one of them was very dark in complexion. And the mom
Mm.
was horrible, treated him very
Wow.
badly, and would say, oh, you're so black and ugly, and all of that to this poor little boy, her own son. And
Wow.
he internalized it, and unfortunately, he became a criminal. Like, I'm not even joking. But
Mm.
that was, you know what I
That's
mean?
sad.
It was
Yeah.
sad, right? It was sad. It's very, very sad, right? It was because it's like, I mean, from the little baby, right? She's about, oh my
Mm.
God, he's so black, right?
Mm.
And then
Mm.
he internalized that, and he got into life of crime. Her other kids came out fine,
Yeah.
successful, because they weren't so dark, right?
Mm.
So yeah, so when you build that being an ally is building a relationship with people who are different, and getting to know them, and not judging them from, because a white person, when you see a white person, you don't judge a white person when you first meet them,
Mm.
especially a white guy. You just say, oh, maybe that white guy, he could be into classical, he could be in rock, he could be into R&B, he could be into rap, right? You don't know, right? Until you get to talk to them and you say, oh,
Yeah.
okay, oh, I didn't know you liked R&B, or, oh,
Mm.
you you like rock music. Oh, you're into classical, or you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you get to know them, right? But as a Black
Mm-hmm.
person, you see me as Black, you think, oh yeah, she's probably like, she's probably into hip hop and fried chicken and watermelon and some of that, which I totally am. I am totally am. I am. So yeah, I do fit that stereotype, but into classical. I play the violin. I
Mm-hmm.
love square dancing. I love square dancing. Just love that, So you would be surprised if I say, and I like rock,
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I don't know, I'm like a square, I guess, or what they say, Oreo cookie, maybe, I don't know, but yeah. So I have all that thing. So not judging a person by your first appearance. Like my daughter is married. Her husband is a senior engineer. He's a senior engineer in a computer company. He wears dreadlocks.
Mm.
Right? If you saw him, you think, oh yeah, he does drugs or something. I don't know, like just by his
Mm.
appearance. But he's like executive director of a senior engineering computer company. So
Wow.
like,
Mm.
so that's really hard.
I'm glad you touched on allyship. I'm gonna read there's a point I'd written in my presentation where it said it would be good for people to have relationships with people of color. This is not so people of color will teach or educate you, but rather so that you have an experience of being connected across lines that have attempted to divide us from our other fellow human beings. So I think the next question naturally would be whose responsibility is it to start these conversations? And leading up to the next question after that was how do we bring this work to our families, relatives, and close relationships with, yes, with intergenerational colorism or
Okay, that's a good
racism?
question.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to get you to answer that, and then I can answer after you.
So that's a really good question. How we bring the to our families, especially those who are. So right now, I go to my church that I go to is a very small community church. There's only on Sundays there's only maybe 30 on average, 30, 35, and out of the 30, 35, about 90% of them are over 70, and
Oh.
and all of them are white. I'm the only Black person. So
Mm-hmm.
so in that sort of setting, I know like they're very nice to me, and I'm you know I do feel welcomed. That's probably why I'm still there. I definitely do feel welcome, but it's
Mm-hmm.
the I don't it would be very hard to talk about racism with them because I feel that they probably have very racist thoughts that I
Yeah.
don't really want to bring that up. I just want to keep it at the comfortable level, and they're very, like I said, they're
Mm-hmm.
very welcoming and they're very nice to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a conversation because I'm not sure whether or not by having with the older generation, the very old stock Canadian that is found prevalently in Peterborough, how much they really want to have that discussion on racism. Now, having said that, we have two counselors who are Black counselors in Peterborough, so they would only get in if the older white generation voted for them. That's the only way they could have gotten in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they're, and that comes with being more, having more of these conversations, right? To eventually, so that they could see that that thinking is wrong, that white supremacy is wrong, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think for
So
me, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
you
Oh, I was just
can go
gonna
ahead.
say for me, I think that the one thing I've really learned throughout like having these Let's Talk sessions is that people want to talk.
Yeah.
They just want a place where they can have a safe conversation and where they can ask questions and they're not afraid to look a certain way. I think a lot of us are really, really since I don't want to, yeah. Even Black people. I know a lot of Black people who are like, I don't want to ask questions because I don't want to offend you. But if we normalize having these conversations, I think that's a good place to start. Let's just start with, in terms of family, let's start with educating our children so that we're not making the same mistakes over and over. We have a lot of TV shows that you could be asking like, so you've seen the show. What do you think about the show? Have you noticed? Do you think that all the little girls can be princesses? Have you noticed something about the little girls that you see in here? Like, start the conversation start with TV, start with newspaper articles, start with something that's pretty mellow, and build up from there. But I think it's important that we be okay with being uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with having discomfort. Whenever there's discomfort, it means that there's an opportunity to grow. That's the way I see it, because I think there's so much growth that can happen from discomfort. Whenever someone says something and I feel uncomfortable, I go back and I'm like, why did I feel uncomfortable about that? A lot of the times it's because there's some kind of prejudice that I have that I need to work on myself. So I think there's so much growth that can happen if we allow ourselves to be uncomfortable in a safe way, in a respectful way. But it's important that we start by asking questions and we start by normalizing having these conversations. We all have social media for the most part. Start with the people who follow you. Start there. If it's at home, dining room table talk. Hey, guys, I've noticed this in the newspaper. What do we think about this? So this has been happening at work. What do you think about this? What are your opinions? We don't have to agree, but we leave with a better understanding of what the other person's experience is. And so that's kind of where I think we could start. Just normalize the conversation. The more we talk about it, the less taboo it becomes. It's like we don't talk about pooping all the time, and that's why it's so uncomfortable whenever people have to go to the bathroom. But it's normal for us to go to the bathroom. So the more we talk about it, such a bad example. But the more we talk about it, I feel like the more we allow for it to be normalized. I think the next question after that was, how do you feel about the media and their role in improving support?
How do you feel about the media and well, that's a question of the year, because the media, a lot of times, the portrayal of Blacks in the media tend to not be very positive, and that's why a lot of Blacks, or just in general, a lot of people in general have negative views of how they see Black people. Because of how they're portrayed in the paper, TV shows, so it's concerning. It's concerning. I don't. I remember when I was in university, our sociology professor would say the only time you see Blacks is when they're singing, dancing, or eating, or something like that. Very limited, right? They have not made Blacks to look like just like a regular folks. They're either criminalized or doing not being like, and even just like any of the movies, really, if you think about it, they tend to have the major roles are not played by Black people, and it's just in general, even it's usually for the whites, or they have the parts, and other minorities they don't get those kind of main character roles, so they're like the sidekick. When like
the funny other person. They're the
Yeah.
funny other person. I
Yeah,
think John said the media controls the narrative. And I think we see that especially right now. At the beginning of all the rallies, it was a lot of like publicity about everything that was going on, and now it's almost changed to talking about the looting and the riots rather than the actual cause. And so you kind of see that shift in narrative. Even the names that they're calling the protesters is they're using a lot of language that shows some kind of like these people are destroying our country, it's inhumane, and almost language that justifies then killing people if that does happen. And so definitely I think they control the narrative, but I think that's why it's important that we have more Black people, or at least more minority people, taking up space, and changing the narrative, and actually creating platforms that speak well about minority people. Because I think we're doing amazing things. We just don't hear about it because we don't control mass media in that capacity. Someone said, what do you think can help improve impoverished neighborhoods in Toronto, such as Jane and Finch, Driftwood neighborhoods, a part of the conversation about police brutality, including ways to improve neighborhoods who get stereotyped as bad neighborhoods. By improve, I mean improve the quality of life for people, not as in further policing these people. Yeah. What do you think of that?
So for that, I know that unfortunately they have pulled some of the funding for a social program. They found that if youth are engaged in some extra curriculum, if they could find work, if they're engaged in some sort of activities to keep them occupied, that they do well. The criminality is decreased, and it's when it comes to those sections of Toronto, which is a lot of Blacks, it's more of it's more of an economic situation as well. So, for example, when my first job was at Canada's Wonderland. I was 16 and I worked there the first year it was open. And I remember there was a very large article at the time that was written in Toronto Star that said that they weren't hiring Blacks at Canada's Wonderland. And I did get the job then there. But then I realized I know why I got the job. As a Black person, and because they said Jane and Finch was close to Canada's Wonderland, and why weren't they hiring people, Blacks from there? They weren't being hired. It was because my postal code. They knew the postal code. I didn't live in that area of Toronto, and that's why, right? It was my postal code. Yeah. And so that's the discrimination, the racial discrimination as well that goes, because they're like, you're from that area, as soon as you put your postal code down, it's like a target on your back, and they need jobs. They have parents who work hard, and some of them have single moms who are working really hard to put food on the table, and so they they need to have some sort of activity that they could work on. So, for example, my daughter she's a big sister. Mind you, she has 3 other sisters. She's like, there's 4 girls, but she joined an organization to be a big sister, and she's a big sister to a young lady that lives in that area. The mom is a single mom. She has 3 kids, and with encouragement from my daughter, this young lady is now in college because my daughter worked with her and worked with her mom to encourage her to continue doing well in school, and just having that ear because she was struggling as a single mom to
Yeah.
have her kids go on the right path, and to see a regular Black folk, which my daughter is. She's not a movie star. She wishes
Mm-hmm.
she was like a Beyonce. Yeah.
Soon, soon.
But she does, you know, and so you may have those big stars, you know, like Oprah, whatever, but you need
Mm-hmm.
the regular folk as your as a mentor, and that's what she was, a regular folk mentoring her, and now she is doing very well in college, like so. Yeah,
I'm just writing down the questions in case the live ends at some point because I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking it's got to time us out very soon. Yemi said that I find that the portrayal of Black people in the media also contributes to why some Black people don't speak out in various environments and settings. What do you think?
yeah, yeah. I would think that absolutely their voices are not heard in the media. So, and again, that's like, for example, in the book, the anti-racism book that I'm reading, there's an example where he's in the classroom, and there's not that many Blacks. It's all white. There's maybe two or three Blacks, and he
Mm-hmm.
said every single time Black people the Black student would put the hand up, the teacher would never ask them. It was always like pointing to the, you
Wow.
know, and so like you're saying, you know, it's from a very early age. It's like, and that's where they become mute, right? From a very early
Mm-hmm.
age, because the teacher's not asking the Black kid who puts his hand up. When I was in high school, check this out. When I was in high school, I went to a school called Dr. Norman Bethune. That is
Mm-hmm.
itself, the name is controversial, but anyhow. Um, and yeah, Dr. Norman Bethune, you know, anyhow, is the thing.
Yeah,
We're running
yeah.
out of time. And so it was geography class, and my teacher's name was Mr. Stamp. And
Mm-hmm.
geography class, his name was Mr. Stamp, but anyhow, I don't know. And yeah, it was really weird that way, right? It was in Scarborough. And he decided somewhere along the semester, I think maybe we were
Mm-hmm.
like halfway into the semester, he was going to change the system where he wouldn't know. I think it was history. I could be wrong. It was either geography or history, or he did a combination of both. He was
Mm-hmm.
going to change it so that he would not know the names. He would not know whose paper he was marking. We were going to be like blinded, like a blind method that
Oh.
you would not know. Like it was a system. Like at the end of the year, you would get your mark, but he didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that he was marking my paper or John's paper. It was just going to
Mm-hmm.
be blind. He put this in. You know what? I got 10% more because he did that on
That's
average. Yeah,
so interesting.
yeah, 10%.
So, in one of my business classes, they were actually talking about how, like, I'm doing a business ethics class, and they were talking about how, with interviewing, they're trying to come up with a way where they can interview you without, like, necessarily seeing, like, who you
Yeah,
are. Obviously, there are things like accents that can give away, like, where you're from, but they've noticed that a lot of cases where they've given people just essays to write and send, it's been a lot fairer,
mm-hmm.
and there's been equal opportunity for all people.
Yes,
Places where they've done blind, like they'll have a wall and have the recruiter and the recruitee there.
yes, yes.
They
Mm-hmm.
again, they've seen that a lot more people of color are hired, and even when they repeated those experiments, they realized that people just by default were picking people that were familiar with them, and by default, because a lot of the recruiters weren't people of color, less people of
Mm-hmm.
color were being picked up. So I find that really
Yeah.
interesting that works.
Yeah, and actually, there's an orchestra. I can't remember where, but I read it that that's what they do when they do the auditions, and they found that there was an
Mm,
increase. They did have an increase in, I think it was their percent female and more
mm.
minority. They had more minority and more female because they changed the way that they selected the orchestra. Was blinded, and they just played behind. They couldn't see them, so they found that there was an increase. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So.
crazy.
I'm going to give you the last question real quick before we get cut out. It says, do you think that the universal basic income could help eliminate the economic factor? I think that's regarding the question about Toronto. Yeah.
Well, the universal, the basic income that this Doug Ford got rid of, it was a pilot project. I think that's what they're saying. And where it helped low-income families to live a better life. So, yes, I think that would help, because then they could, instead of at the end of the month not having enough food on the table, or they could use it to improve their situation, whether it's to go back to school or things like that. Even when it comes to food security, people of color, a higher proportion of people of color do have are suffering from food security. So a basic income, the universal income, would help so that they wouldn't. They would have enough, enough to eat and to care for their families properly. Especially these, if it's a single mom, it could make a world of difference helping her family so that she's not working 2 to 3 jobs at a time. So, yeah.
Why did they get rid of it? Because it was a pilot project?
Oh, yes. Doug Ford, when he came in, he got rid of it, unfortunately. But it had shown very good success. It was limited, though, because it was done, I think, in Lindsay was one of the pilot places. But, yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Charmaine. I really, really appreciate you. I don't see any questions. I will just do like a quick social service announcement. There is a rally protest happening tomorrow downtown Peterborough at 12. I'm going to be posting about it straight after this live session. Please be safe, social distancing, masks, all of that stuff. But I think if that's something that you want to do, please support, be an ally in whatever way you feel comfortable in. They do have a Facebook page. Again, I'll link all of that in the description. Thank you so much, Charmaine, for being part of this conversation. And thank you to every single person who commented. We really value the questions that you had. And they really made us think about life outside of the 4 walls of our houses. And we do host conversations like this every other Monday. So every second Monday, we talk about something. Last month, it was talk colorism, and we really just went ham on colorism. We spoke about everything. Everything colorism. Again, if you want to watch the videos, I have them on my YouTube channel, or you can view them through my website. But this is just a community. We want to have conversations. If you have any topic ideas, send them through. Nothing is off the grid. Charmaine, do you have any final words?
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you and others who are on this call on this. So thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Okay, guys. Thank you. So again, my name is Ropofadzo. This is Charmaine, and this has been Let's Talk Racism and Racial Injustice. We appreciate you. We love you. Please stay safe. Remember, there is a protest tomorrow at 12. All the information, I will link in all the information after I post this. I'll share it on all social medias. Have an awesome evening, guys. Sleep well.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.